In a single day, the most powerful companies on Earth lost a fortune so large it is almost impossible to picture. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Gone. In a matter of hours. And here is the part that makes no sense. The thing that wiped out all that money was the exact same thing everyone promised would make these companies unstoppable. Artificial intelligence. For 2 years, you have been told that artificial intelligence is the future, that the giant technology companies pouring money into it were guaranteed winners, that this was the surest bet in the world. So why did that very same technology just turn around and punish them? Why did the smartest, richest companies on the planet suddenly start bleeding, all at once, over the one thing they bet everything on? And here is the question that should really get your attention. There is a very good chance that you own a piece of these companies right now, today, without even realizing it. Which means this is not just their problem. It might quietly be yours too. Stick with me, because by the end of this video you will understand the real reason Wall Street suddenly got scared. Not the surface reason in the headlines. The two things happening underneath, at the same time, that almost nobody is connecting. Let us start with what actually happened. On one ordinary Monday, the biggest names in technology took a beating. The parent company of Google had one of its worst single days in more than a year, falling around 5%. The company behind your online shopping fell about 4%. The maker of Windows dropped 3%. Even the company that owns your social media apps slid lower. Together, in just a few hours, they shed hundreds of billions of dollars in value. Now, normally when a stock falls, there's an obvious villain. Bad earnings, a scandal, a lawsuit. But this time, none of that happened. These companies were still making money. They still had millions of customers. On paper, nothing had broken. So what spooked everyone? It comes down to two quiet truths that the cheerful headlines tend to skip over. And once you see them together, the whole picture suddenly makes sense. Here is the first one. The spending has become absolutely enormous, and the payoff has not shown up yet. To build artificial intelligence, you need staggering amounts of equipment. Giant warehouses full of specialized computer chips. Endless electricity. Whole buildings that cost more than small cities. And this year, the biggest technology companies are on track to spend more than $450 billion building all of it. $450 billion. On a promise. Because here is the uncomfortable part. All of that money is going out the door right now today. But the profits that are supposed to come from artificial intelligence, those are still mostly somewhere off in the future. The building is happening at full speed. The reward is running late. And you can see the strain in the numbers. At Google's parent company, the spare cash it generates fell by nearly half in a single quarter, down to about $10 billion. That sounds like a lot, until you remember they are trying to spend many times that on this build-out. And then came the detail that really made investors nervous. This company, one of the richest on the planet, sitting on a mountain of cash, suddenly announced it wanted to raise $85 billion in fresh money to keep funding its artificial intelligence dreams. One veteran investor said it plainly. He never thought he would see the day when Google needed to go out and raise money just to pay for its own spending. Think about that. It is like watching the wealthiest family in town suddenly start taking out loans. Even if nothing is wrong, it makes you wonder. What do they know that we do not? If you are finding this useful, take 1 second and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of money story we break down here every week. Now here is the second truth. And this one is more human, and honestly, a little more chilling. The people who actually built artificial intelligence are starting to walk out the door. You have to understand, the entire artificial intelligence boom rests on a tiny handful of brilliant minds. A few hundred people in the whole world who truly know how to build these systems. And lately, some of the most important of them have been quietly leaving the biggest companies. One of them is a man who won a Nobel Prize. He helped create a system that mapped the structure of more than 200 million proteins, a breakthrough that is saving scientists years of work and could change medicine forever. He spent nearly a decade at Google, and then, recently, he left to join a rival. Another, one of the key minds behind Google's flagship artificial intelligence, also walked away to join a competitor. Now ask yourself, if artificial intelligence at these companies were such a guaranteed, world-conquering success, why are the very people who built it choosing to leave? When the star players start quietly heading for the exits, the people watching from the stands start to worry that the game is turning. And now, put those two truths side by side. Enormous spending with no payoff yet. and the brightest builders walking away. When you stack those together, you arrive at the word that Wall Street is terrified to say out loud. A bubble. This is the fear that nobody wants to be the first to admit. That maybe the world got a little too excited. That maybe everyone is spending the same astronomical sums chasing the same dream, and that not all of them are going to win. The chief of one of the biggest technology companies himself recently warned that artificial intelligence was becoming a commodity, something common and easily copied rather than a magic edge. And one of the founding figures of the entire field openly warned that the industry is risking what he called a big bubble explosion. When the people on the inside start using words like that, the people on the outside start selling. But here is why this matters to you specifically, even if you have never bought a single share of stock in your life. Over the last few years, a small group of these technology giants has grown so massive that they now make up a huge slice of the entire stock market. And that market is exactly where your money quietly lives. If you have a retirement account at work, a simple index fund, a 401k, the odds are very high that a big chunk of it is riding on these exact companies. So when they lose hundreds of billions in a day over artificial intelligence fears, that is not just a headline about billionaires. That is a number that can show up, a little smaller, in your own future. You may have bet on artificial intelligence without ever once deciding to. Now, let me be fair, because the full story matters. One bad day is not the end of the world. These are still powerful, profitable companies with enormous advantages, and plenty of smart investors believe the spending will eventually pay off in a huge way. The optimists were buying the dip before the day was even over. This might turn out to be a stumble, not a collapse. But that is exactly the question worth sitting with. Is this the moment a little air started leaking out of the biggest bet in modern history? Or just a bump on the road to something even bigger? So let us go back to where we started. In a single day, the most powerful companies on Earth lost a fortune, and the cause was the very technology that was supposed to make them invincible. Now you know it was not one thing. It was two. A mountain of spending with the reward running late, and the brilliant minds who built it all quietly slipping away. Artificial intelligence was always sold to you as the rocket engine that would carry these companies to the stars. The real question, the one nobody wants to answer yet, is whether that engine is still firing or whether it has quietly become the heaviest thing they are carrying. So the next time someone tells you a particular bet simply cannot lose, remember this Monday. Remember the $450 billion. And ask the one question almost nobody asked in time. Not how high can this go, but what happens if the dream takes longer to arrive than the bill?